Hello and welcome to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast, a resilience podcast where we talk about all the challenging things that we're working to overcome, like anxiety, obesity, health, and relationship issues. My name is Sarah. I have spoken in previous episodes about my family's experience with a disorder called PANDAS, Pediatric, Autoimmune, Neuropsychiatric disorder associated with Streptococcal infections. PANDAS is a relatively little-known disorder that presents with psychiatric issues like OCD, anxiety, tics, emotional lability, aggression, and regression, among other symptoms. It is also the subject of my middle grade novel, Pendulum, by S.E. German, in which an 11-year-old boy talks about his life, including his struggle with PANDAS. This week, I am so thrilled to welcome Dr. Jennifer Bahr, naturopathic doctor and founder of Resilience Naturopath in San Diego, California. She's an expert in PANDAS and PANS and has been treating patients successfully with homeopathic remedies. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and hearing her wisdom about treatments and bringing more light to these disorders. So welcome, Dr. Jennifer Bahr, to the podcast. I'm really excited to speak with you this week.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for asking me.
So why don't we get started with you providing a quick overview of your background and then also letting us know how you got interested in treating PANDAS and PANS in particular.
So you want the long version or the short version?
The long one.
Okay. So I'm a naturopathic doctor. And so just for anybody who's not familiar with what a naturopathic doctor is, we go to a 4-year naturopathic medical school that's comparable to an MD or a DO. The first 2 years are relatively identical with a few small exceptions. The second 2 years is where it really differs. We're focusing on integrative and natural health from the get-go. So we do a lot more focus on nutrition, botanical medicine, physical medicine, homeopathy. My program actually includes acupuncture, so all sorts of natural opportunities to help with healing, as well as the more conventional side, so all the testing and medications and everything as well. So that's what my training is in. I specifically focus on homeopathy, and that came about sort of organically through my own personal health experiences. So when I actually started naturopathic medical school, I didn't intend to focus on homeopathy. It was through my own experience with my conventional doctor, who told me that the only way I could have a child was to basically do this ridiculous therapy that sounded barbaric to me because the medications that I was on were not compatible with pregnancy. And so I decided to try homeopathy, and it ended up being really, really the most powerful medicine I've ever experienced. And so I figured out that I needed to learn how to do it. The intention was to always focus on the mental health realm because of my own personal history and then my family history as well. We had a lot of mental health challenges. And so I wanted to help kids too, in particular, because my stuff started when I was young. And so I was doing a general health focus or general mental health focused practice, and PANS and PANDAS kept showing up. And I didn't really understand why it kept showing up. But I was having success treating it. And so, of course, PANS and PANDAS moms really help each other out. And so when they said, hey, I've had success with this doc, give her a call, more and more people kept coming. So I wasn't specifically looking to treat PANS and PANDAS. It just sort of fell in my lap. And then I figured out after the fact why. And the reason I think that I ended up finally embracing it and deciding to focus exclusively on working with families with PANS and PANDAS is because I really got these kids. I got them from a perspective that you can't really get from a book. And I realized the more I learned about PANS and PANDAS, I realized that I actually had it as a child, and so did my brother.
Wow, yeah.
And so like all of the mental health diagnoses that we'd been given and the medications that we'd been given that didn't work quite the way that they were supposed to, and had all sorts of other complications. And it makes sense. It all adds up. I had every single symptom of PANS as a child, with the exception I didn't have really, really bad tics. But I had basically everything else. And so did my brother, including like the sudden onset, the association with, fluctuations associated with illness. And, I even had my tonsils taken out like a lot of kids with PANS and PANDAS do. And I'm going way down the rabbit hole, so I apologize, but had a big flare after all of that and everything too. So I would say that like pans and pandas wasn't something I necessarily got interested in. I actually fought against it quite a bit, but it found me and it kept coming for me. And then I realized it's because I have this ability to connect. And then ultimately, I was fortunate because of my experience with discovering homeopathy and using it for myself. I did get off all of those medications that were incompatible with pregnancy. And I fortunately did finally get pregnant, and I had my daughter almost 14 months ago.
Oh, wow. And congratulations.
Thank you. And so now the reason I continue to do it is for her, because as I'm sure you are aware, there's a tendency for pans and pandas to sort of run in families that we're finding more and more. And so I know that given the fact that I'm like 99% certain had it, and my brother also 99% certain had it, there's a chance that she could have it. So now I'm doing it for my daughter, really. And because all of the families that we serve could be my family just as easily.
Absolutely. And you're right. Like so many times, a lot of that motivation comes from our own experience, but then our children too. So that's super interesting. So why do you think that pans and pandas are so challenging to treat?
Oh my gosh, because it involves everything. It involves the nervous system, the immune system, the gastrointestinal system. It is so complex. I mean, even endocrine can get involved in many ways too. It's very complex. And because it's, at least in the conventional realm, one of the reasons it's so hard to treat is because we're chasing the bug or the inflammation associated with pans or pandas. We're not chasing what's actually the problem, which is susceptibility. So when you think about it, if it was just the bug that was the problem, then killing the bug would make it go away and it would never come back. And anybody who got that bug should also get the same symptoms, right? So if strep, in this instance of pandas, strep does not cause tics and OCD and rage and urinary incontinence and behavioral regression and academic regression. It doesn't cause that in everybody who gets it. You know, if you were to get strep, you would probably get a sore throat and a fever, and in a few days after a round of antibiotics, you'd be fine. But the kiddos who have pandas, they have oftentimes no signs of strep. So it's not the bug that's causing it. It's the way we react to the bug. And so that's what really makes it so challenging, is that we just don't have tools in conventional medicine that actually treat the susceptibility. And the only thing that really actually treats that susceptibility is homeopathy. And then with homeopathy, it has its own set of challenges where, the way homeopathy works is we have to actually match a remedy that's made from a single substance found in nature to the unique expression or symptoms that the kiddo is having. And so we've got over 3,000 remedies we can choose from. And so we have to really understand the nature of pans, the nature of pandas itself as a condition, plus the unique expression that the kiddo in front of us is experiencing, so that we can find that one best fit. And so that's the challenge when it comes to homeopathic medicine. But for conventional medicine, we just don't have the tools to actually address that susceptibility. We just have things to go in and try and put out the inflammation, try and temporarily modulate the immune system by giving intravenous immunoglobulins, or killing the bugs with antibiotics or antibacterials or antifungals, So I think that's one of the reasons that it's so challenging. And then in addition to that, there's so many things that can be triggers for these kiddos. So pandas is the one that most people are most familiar with, but that's just a subset of pans. So pandas is where the trigger is strep. Pans is where the trigger can be so many things. It could be any number of infections. It could be mold. It could be environmental toxicants. It's all sorts of things can actually trigger. It's anything even allergens, like ragweed can cause flares for some of these kiddos. It's anything that the body's immune system is seeing as a threat and having this inappropriate, misdirected response to. And that's why we can feel like we're chasing things nonstop. It's like we figure out this, if you're just, trying to kill things or squash things using antibiotics, antivirals, antihistamines, yada, yada. You find one thing, but then another thing pops up, and then you find that, and then you find something to squash that, and then another thing pops up because the susceptibility hasn't been addressed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And we have totally experienced that with my son for sure. So I know you started to talk a little bit about the approach of homeopathy, but can you go into a little more detail about the treatments that are working in some cases, maybe for pandaspans, or sort of your general approach?
So with homeopathy, like I said, we use single substances found in nature. And the way that homeopathy is recommended, they're very, very dilute. So I should first say that they're very dilute, which means that they're very safe, but doesn't mean that they're not very powerful. In fact, can be quite powerful for these kiddos because these kiddos are just so sensitive. I mean, I guess that's something I didn't really conceptualize with the last question that you asked me, but the way I've sort of conceptualized it is that these kiddos are not really, quote unquote sick, even though people will say that some of these kiddos can be among the sickest people. I don't really see them that way. I just see them as very, very sensitive because the things that they're reacting to are things that are generally not good for anybody. They're just having a very exaggerated reaction to it. And so they're like the canaries in the coal mine for us, right? They're telling us all of the things that if we just got rid of all of these things that are happening in the world that these kids are reacting to, that we would all, as humanity, probably be healthier. So back to the reason I bring this up is that, homeopathy uses very dilute forms of these natural substances that we can find throughout nature. Plant, mineral, animal sources are what they're primarily made from. And what we have to do is we have to match them to the symptoms that these kiddos are experiencing. And once we find that good match, it stimulates the body to heal. I don't know if I'm really quite answering your question.
Yeah. No,
you give me more. Yeah. If you have any more specifics that you can help direct me, that would be great.
Yeah. So in the case, maybe you can dig into how you match the symptoms. So do you look at sort of the whole list? I mean, I know, for example, with my son, there's kind of a specific list for him versus another child. And then is it that, some of the remedies may target multiple, or do you is there a combination that you're using?
Yeah, fantastic question. So what we practice here at Resilience Naturopathic is classical homeopathy. There's a lot of different schools of thought with homeopathy where people are, generally, of course, always trying to make it easier, better, faster. We really focus on the tried and true method that was established over 200 years ago and that has stood the test of time and still is quite effective today. And so we do a single remedy at a time. One thing that's really fantastic about homeopathy that makes it so well suited for kids with PANS and PANDAS is that it is a whole person medicine. So what we're looking at is not just the symptoms of PANS. You can't come into a homeopath and say, I would really like the OCD that my kiddo is experiencing to go away. Can we just focus on the OCD? That won't work because oftentimes even the thing that you're most concerned about isn't necessarily the thing that's going to give us the indication for the remedy that we need to stimulate healing. So we have to look at the totality because the reality is the OCD might not be that unique. It might be pretty common, to any of the kids who have OCD is one of their primary concerns with PANS or PANDAS. So the OCD itself might not be unique, even if it's the most problematic. What might be unique is the bowel function or a type of anxiety that they have that's not related to the OCD, but is very specific and unique. Or it could be a rash that they have, could be what's the most indicative. That being said, even if we're looking at some of the physical concerns or things that you consider to be tangential, if this stayed around forever, I could deal with it. Please, please, please just focus on get rid of the OCD or get rid of the rage. Even when we're focusing on these things that seem like they're to the side, they could actually still show improvements in the main thing that you're concerned about. So we always have to look at the totality, the global symptoms, and we're always looking for improvements as a whole person. And the reason we really have to focus on this is a truly healing approach. And so when you think about it, our body, our brain, everything is connected. So when we heal as a whole person. So that's one of the ways that it's really different and why we have to take a look at the totality of everything that's going on.
Okay. And one of the ways that it's totally different than conventional medicine for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And you're definitely not going to leave when you're seeing a classically trained homeopath who's actually practicing classical Hahnemannian homeopathy, you're going to leave with one remedy and not a whole list of things to do. So it's, kind of nice for parents too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, and I think one of the things that's been surprising to me is sometimes there are things going on that you don't even know is a pandas thing. Like I've had that
Very
experience
true.
where, I get questions about, well, what about, does he ever have this kind of rash, or have you ever seen this type of behavior or whatever? And you don't even realize that it's something. I think that's really eye-opening, but it makes sense
Yeah.
that then once you weed through all of those things, you kind of get a better healing in the end. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
And so the way that we actually find these remedies is we do a quite extensive intake. So for here at Resilience Naturopathic, we schedule up to 3 hours. It's generally about 2 to 3 hours, just depending on the doc and the kiddo and a lot of factors. But generally 2 to 3 hours we're spending with people because we need to know their entire history. We need to know the details, not just like my kiddo has OCD. Okay, what happens with OCD? Not just that my kiddo has rage. Okay, what does your child look like? What triggers the rage? What do they look like when they're having the rage? Walk me through what happens. What calms them down? Is there a time of day that this gets worse? And so it's, really getting to know almost like we were experiencing it ourselves, which is probably why I got so good at it in the beginning, because I'd had that experience. So I was able to connect with that really, really pretty quickly. But we have to understand in great detail what somebody is experiencing so that we can then match the symptoms. And what we're doing as docs is we're gathering all of this information. And so we have to have had the knowledge and awareness of PANS and PANDAS in great detail so that we know to ask you these questions that you might not even think, this is something to be included. So we also, so just for finding the remedy, we need to know it well enough to know what's characteristic and what's not, know what to dig more for. We also have to know the remedies that we are considering, and then we have to go through the literature. So what we're always doing here at Resilience Naturopathic is we're going back to look at the documentation that we have from testing on human subjects to know what symptoms can be elicited by taking these particular remedies in a healthy person, so that we know what they can be used for treating somebody who is in an unhealthy state, as well as clinical verifications. So we're basically like gathering all this information to really understand exactly what's going on, growing through our little Rolodex in our brain of remedies, looking up and using some tools to compare other remedies as well. And then we're going through the literature to make sure that what we're seeing in the kiddo matches up to what has been verified multiple times to actually be effective for. So it's a pretty in-depth process that we go about to find these things. That's why most people are finding that they are having significantly more success with treating PANS and PANDAS using homeopathy if they're working with a skilled practitioner who specializes in PANS and PANDAS.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, you kind of talked about that initial appointment. How long are you finding that treatment takes? Is it years? Does it, really vary?
Yeah. So with homeopathy, what we're doing is we're just gently stimulating the body to heal. So the remedy isn't necessarily doing anything more than nudging the body to do what it's supposed to do on its own, which is how it's actually addressing that susceptibility. So it's getting the body to move back into its ability to handle these infections on its own, because, if you think about it, we don't always need antibiotics. We can have an appropriate immune response and reduce our susceptibility to getting sick, period, because again, susceptibility, not everybody who comes in contact with an infection is going to get sick, right?
Right. Yeah.
So homeopathy helps to strengthen your resistance to certain things, as well as restore a more appropriate immune function. And so it takes time. So we generally say it's 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back, and another 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back. I'm a hiker, so I always compare it to hiking a mountain, that even when we are going a little bit downhill, which is that 1 step back where we see some symptoms start to return, that we are still making forward progress. We just need to make an adjustment to the remedy, either changing the preparation of it or changing the remedy itself if symptoms have changed, to continue that process heading toward the top. And so it generally, it takes a while. For most people here at Resilience Naturopathic, the average time that we're working with people is about 18 to 24 months until they're going to as needed visits, where they just are taking remedy every once in a while if they see symptoms start to peak in, and they might follow up a couple of times a year just to tweak things a little bit. But we also have lots of people that usually after that 2-year mark, get to the point that they don't need us anymore. We always say that our job is to work ourselves out of a job. And the good thing is that homeopathy can actually do that. It can lead to that level of repair of the susceptibility that people don't need regular follow-ups. And the way, I'm sure this is like, I'm trying to read somebody's mind right here. The way that we know that we're there is that they can actually get repeated exposure to something that they've been triggered by before and not have PANS or PANDAS flares. Oftentimes they'll have just like regular strep symptoms if they get exposed to strep, or sometimes strep will be going around the school and they have no symptoms at all because they're that much stronger that their body's able to fight it off.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds amazing. So on your website, it mentions kind of that the treatments can get families off the flare roller coaster. And I really identified with that myself. I mean, we have seen that with my son, kind of seeing the flares for so many of the things that you already mentioned: allergies, virus exposure, stressful times. And then we're always kind of looking at the next step. So I think you kind of explained some of this, but I guess I'm sort of wondering though, why does that always happen? But then with your treatment, are we looking then, is it just a tweak, or do you kind of have to start all over again with a flare, I guess?
You definitely don't have to start all over again. So flares are a normal part of the process. I wish so much that we could just give a remedy and like everything would be fine. It would be smooth sailing. Like that whole analogy of climbing a mountain with 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back. I always say I wish that it could be like riding an elevator or even an escalator, where it was just nice and smooth and like just get to where you want to go without needing to have all the ups and downs and the trudgery. But the trudgery does still have improvements that are being held. You're not going back to square one. It's just, your body is, a couple of things can happen with a flare. So first and foremost, what we're trying to do with homeopathy is we're trying to get the immune system functioning appropriately. So it's sort of retraining it and reducing that susceptibility. And so while you're still susceptible, before the full healing has occurred, you're going to get exposure to things and have things show up, have flare symptoms show up, because the body has not really fully retuned itself, if you will. And so eventually the body has had that ability to completely retune itself, and you don't have those flares anymore. So it's not starting over again every time that things have like a drop back. When you're talking about with homeopathy, it could be from exposure to something that is more powerful than the response to the remedy. Or if you're already on a remedy and you haven't necessarily had a known exposure, the way that the remedies work is it's a gentle stimulus to the body to heal. And I will compare it oftentimes to like the sound of, I have like the fan that I have running in my office here. I just noticed the sound of the fan right now because I was looking for a sound that I could call out. When it first got started, I noticed it, the noise that it made, and then my body attuned to it.
Right.
And so I completely tuned it out. And the body will do that similar type of thing with a homeopathic remedy. After a time, it tunes it out. And so at that point, when it's tuned it out, we'll see some symptoms start to come back, whether or not there's been an exposure. And at that point, all we have to do is adjust the remedy. So sometimes if there are any new symptoms or changes in the symptoms that we have seen, we'll get a different remedy to continue the healing process. And sometimes we'll make an adjustment in the potency if there's really nothing that's been different. And what that is like, going with the sound analogy, that's like going from one octave to another octave with the same note on a piano. It's the same thing, but it's just slightly different so that we can pick up on it again.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just thinking, I know with a lot of PANDAS kids or PANS as well, that sometimes the onset is pre-puberty. And then, how does puberty impact that? Is that sometimes another flare coming on? Or because I would think that would sort of throw that tuning of the body maybe out a little bit.
It does. I always am really excited when I can get somebody before puberty or after puberty and that we can get things handled, especially if we can get it taken care of before puberty starts. Things just generally go a lot smoother. Okay. A lot of times if we can get it managed before puberty hits, we don't have the same complications that we have if we're in the middle of getting things managed with puberty, because puberty throws in that extra thing with the endocrine system becoming more involved as well in a much higher level than it was previously. Because it was already sort of involved with the amount of stress and cortisol and whatnot and disruptions to melatonin that we see with these kiddos with their sleep disruption as well. But yes, puberty does throw a little bit of a wrench in things, and it oftentimes will shift the nature of the symptoms that are being experienced as well. It's still absolutely possible to work with. It just gets a little bit more complicated. And that's also complicated by the fact that generally at that time, kiddos are a little bit less willing to communicate what it is that they're experiencing, both with parents and with docs. So,
no, that makes a lot of sense. But it's
not impossible. Yeah.
Okay. I know when I interviewed Dr. Scott and Ellen Antoine, they talked a little bit about mold being something that is present in a lot of the pandas children that they treat and tends to be kind of an underlying issue. And it's something that I've heard from many families and we're looking at for my son as well. So I'm just wondering if you found that to be common in your practice, and then is there like a specific treatment, or does that just kind of add to that list that you're looking to treat?
So mold is definitely a problem. It's one of the things that I'd mentioned earlier can be a really big trigger for kids with PANS. And so it is definitely a problem. However, it's not something that we have to just focus exclusively on the mold. We do have to pay attention to the mold because if we are living in an environment that has high levels of toxic mold, that's not healthy for anybody. And it's especially not healthy for a PANS or PANDAS kiddo. But we're still having to focus on that susceptibility. So like if you find mold in your home, you're not having panda symptoms, I presume, but your son is, right? And so you still have different susceptibility to it. I always give my family as an example. I have been through years and years of homeopathic treatment, so I am at a much higher level. I'm less susceptible to the world, period. My husband has not been through as much time getting homeopathic treatment, and he is actually quite susceptible to mold. He is my canary for mold. He does have a little bit of impacts on his sleep and his mood, but his telltale sign is actually a rash. So it's not necessarily that like mold is going to cause PANS symptoms. Mold can cause lots of different things. It depends on what your weakness is or what your susceptibility is. And so we still have to address that with homeopathy. But in addition to that, we do need to remediate if we have a high level of mold, because while homeopathy can help with that susceptibility and the reactivity that you have to mold, there are certain amounts of mold that you just have to remediate. So that's really where we focus is just on including the reaction, the symptoms that are present as a result of exposure to mold in that big global picture that we're looking at with homeopathy.
And so kind of beyond the homeopathic remedy, do you then also suggest other changes like diet? You know, you mentioned maybe environmental changes, other lifestyle kind of changes, something like therapy maybe to help with stress. Like, do you sort of see that integrated piece, or do you kind of just focus your clients? Yeah. So sometimes it depends on the individual. I mean, that's really what it comes down to with PANS and PANDAS. If you've seen one kid with PANS, you've seen one kid with PANS. I mean, you can really, there's like common threads, but they all have their own unique ways of responding to things, the symptoms that they present and the things that are triggers. And so we need to absolutely take a look at the diet, because, homeopathy is not this be all end all panacea, like nothing in health is, right? So homeopathy cannot supplement for a poor diet, so we do need to look at, if a kiddo is having some of their symptoms because they're deficient in nutrients, because their diet is just, white bread and pasta, then we do need to take a look at the diet. The good news is that a lot of the things that we see with these kiddos is that they are more accepting of healthier diets after they've started homeopathic treatment. So we don't tend to start, because they're healthier, right? And so they're more willing and able, because like a healthy body wants healthier things. Like when when you're wanting junk food, you're probably not feeling your best self, right? You're probably not in the best state. And so they're more accepting and more willing and to accept different foods, in part because we're treating the sensory processing stuff. We're also treating the OCD that could be contributing to avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. All of the things that go around with diet. Therapy is occasionally really beneficial as well. It's just, again, kid to kid. And the things that we will see can be most helpful: trauma therapy, if there was any trauma associated with the PANS or PANDAS or anything that contributed to flares. We can also see
for some kiddos, exposure response prevention can be helpful, but it's not always necessary. And for some kiddos, that's just really, really hard and almost traumatizing in and of itself. But those are, we'll sometimes look at those things. And then occasionally we do recommend some like CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy for kiddos who maybe have been dealing with it for quite some time and they've almost integrated ways of behaving that are not necessarily any longer dictated by inflammation, but that are still happening because they have learned that they get certain outcomes if they behave a certain way. And like parents can usually tell when that shift has happened because they go from like recognizing that their child cannot control it to like actually being able to control it in situations or with the right consequences coming up. That's when they can sort of see that that shift has happened and that sometimes therapy is helpful there. And sometimes depending on the family dynamic, sometimes we'll actually even recommend parents do some like parenting coaching because the nature of of the kid that you're parenting has changed. And so like your parenting strategies have to change as well. And so those are sort of the things that we'll throw in every once in a while. Occasionally, so, we are here at Resilience Naturopathic anyway, we are all trained naturopathic doctors. So we have expertise in homeopathy, but are trained in lots of other modalities as well. And occasionally we'll recommend something else and even tell people if they have an active infection that they need short-term course of antibiotics. But our goal is to have everybody off of antibiotics long-term, especially these kiddos who are on it for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so then basically after going through the treatment program, the idea is to sustain long-term health independently.
Yeah. Like I said, our goal is to work ourselves out of a job. And I love it when I get to talk to somebody and they haven't taken a dose of their remedy in 6 months or more. And I'm like, look, your kiddo's done. You don't need me anymore. You can give me a call if something comes up. But yeah, it basically homeopathy is helping to restore that health. A lot of people will continue to use homeopathy, but they're not needing it for chronic conditions anymore. They're using it for acute things that come up, like an acute, sniffles that come across, or like, normal teenager stuff that they're dealing with some like disappointments in love and, stress about, college entrance exams, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. It can still be a partner throughout, but not having to address pandas or pans.
Yeah. Not needing to take a remedy every day or talk to a doctor every month or anything like that. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. And so I think like having looked at your website, it looks like you do a lot of this virtually as well.
We actually are exclusively virtual at this point. When we started expanding, when I made the commitment to serve this community and to serve the heck out of them as best as I possibly could, I made the decision that it was in everybody's best interest for me to be able to hire the best homeopathic, naturopathic doctors, no matter where they were located. And so we decided to go ahead and do exclusive virtual practice. So while I'm based out of San Diego, everybody's working online.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, and then to that, you can also serve really anybody, right? Exactly.
Like we wanted to like reduce as many barriers to getting this support as we possibly could. So yeah, we work with people all over the world and do exclusive virtual work.
Amazing. That sounds great. And I think so many people are going to find this very interesting and very hopeful, I guess, is what I would like to say. Is there anything else in terms of the treatment that you'd want to mention or any other tools?
I think that the challenge here is that I'm trying to be concise and give like something that I could literally spend hours and hours and hours talking about in a very short period of time. So if you don't mind, I would be happy to share a place that people could learn in more depth about homeopathy.
No, that's absolutely great. Yeah, if you can share that, and then any of the social media or website handles, things like that would be great.
Yeah. So our website is an okay place to start, but I'll be perfectly honest, it's just it's not where we have the most of our information. What I recommend if people want to learn more about homeopathy for pans and pandas or homeopathy in general is to join our Facebook group, which is called Homeopathy for Pans and Pandas. I just have a couple of questions people need to enter. We do want to make sure that anybody who's in the group is a parent of a child with pans or pandas. We do this because this is a group for people to connect with each other as well. So we've got two parts to it. we do a ton, like literally hundreds of hours of educational videos in that group, starting with a mini course that teaches you all that you need to know about homeopathy, about PANS and PANDAS, testing for it, additional considerations, how homeopathy works, how we generally are doing things, with a little bit more structure than we were able to have today. And then lots and lots of videos that I do with our docs and then other mothers and such, to like really bring down the from the doctor level to like, here's what it actually looks like in your home. So hundreds of hours of videos to teach you all that you want to know about homeopathy and PANS and PANDAS is in that group. And then the other aspect of it is that it's really become a strong support community, because everybody who's in there is a parent of a child with PANS or PANDAS. And so it's a place for people to connect and support each other and lift each other up. And so that's why we also make sure that not just anybody can join to learn more about that particular group. However, we are working in the very near future on launching our own podcast to basically do the same work that we're doing in the group, but make it in a more accessible way so that we can have that special protected place for parents, but then also give that information out to the community. So the best way to find out more about the podcast and the YouTube channel when we launch it is to just follow me on social media. So follow me right now primarily on Facebook. And so it's Dr. Jennifer Bahr, that's Bahr. You can find me there and follow me, and we'll definitely make sure any announcements for the podcast or the YouTube program, YouTube channel are announced there so that you can follow those as well if you're somebody who is interested in learning or think you may have a friend or something like that, but don't really meet the criteria to join the Facebook group.
That sounds amazing. I'm really looking forward to the podcast. That will be great. It's not something that's super easy to find, and yet I think that will be
needed.
Good. Yeah, information for community. And I know that so many people that are like family members and things like that are trying to learn more. And so I think this will be helpful for them as well.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I will link up to your Facebook as well in the show notes. And I've really appreciated this conversation and all of the extra information that you've given us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you again to Dr. Jennifer Bahr from Resilience Naturopath for her time today and explaining homeopathic remedies in such wonderful detail so that everyone can understand how this treatment works. And I really think it sounds like a great method for pandaspans, and I'm really interested into digging into it further myself. I think her Facebook group, the Homeopathy for Pans and Pandas, parent group sounds great. It's something that I'm a part of, and I'm very interested in her podcast and YouTube work as well. Please check her out on Facebook, as she mentioned, as Dr. Jennifer Bahr, and I will link up to that in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week. I wrote a book. I'd love for you to check it out. Pendulum by S.E. German is available now. Pendulum is a heartwarming story that follows a young boy who experiences mental health challenges like anxiety, OCD and depression, ADHD and tics following an infection. It turns out he has a little-known disorder called PANDAS. The book follows the young boy as he struggles with his health issues as well as regular middle grade issues, and it can act as a wonderful catalyst between you and your children to talk about mental health issues and other things that are going on in their life. Pendulum is available online through Amazon worldwide, Barnes & Noble, the Friesen Press bookstore, and a number of other online retailers worldwide. And you can check out Chapter 1, the audio version of Pendulum, for free on the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast in episode 64. I hope you enjoy Pendulum by S.E. German, and let me know what you think. I'm excited to announce that in June of 2021, I'm going to be running my first 30-day challenge for everyone that signs up for my mailing list. As you may know, I'm giving out a 30-day self-care calendar when you sign up for my mailing list. And along with that, we can then do all of those 30 ideas that are only 10 minutes long throughout the month of June. every day. Join me as I'm doing IG lives and posting about it on my Instagram account, and start building in the self-care to every day. So if you want to join me, please visit the link in the bio of my Instagram page. It's at Sarah, SarahLadyGluten, at Sarah Lady Gluten. Click on the link in my bio. And from there, at the bottom of that page, you can sign up for my mailing list. I tend to send emails every 2 weeks or so with just updates on the podcast and my writing and things that are going on. And you'll also then right away get a free 30-day self-care calendar. Join me for Self-Care June. Thank you for listening to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast. Please keep in mind this podcast is not intended to be medical or professional advice. If you are looking for that advice, please seek that out from a professional. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can visit my blog, www.theallergybeast.wordpress.com, or follow me online at Sarah Lady Gluten on Instagram, SarahLadyGluten, or the Facebook page, Sarah-Lady Gluten. If you do like the podcast, please consider subscribing so that you will get the podcast update every week, and or reviewing the podcast on whatever platform you listen to. Thanks again, and have a great week.